and today we're going to be making tapas or pinchos, depending on where in Spain you're from. And we're going to start with a classic Spanish tortilla or Tortilla Española, which is essentially eggs, onions, and potatoes. So 2 large potatoes, russets are totally okay, and we're going to peel these and slice these thin. You're looking for about a 1/4 inch, maybe a little thinner than that. We're just going to put this into water so they don't oxidize, and we're going to continue to do that with all the potatoes. And then you're going to need 1 large onion, and you're going to just cut this nice and thin into slices. You can go pretty rough. And from here, we're going to put this into a pot, and we're going to cover it with oil. I like to use a neutral oil, not olive oil. 1, because it's super expensive to use olive oil, and 2, it's just easier. And I like to use canola oil. Sunflower oil is great too. And we're just going to cover the potatoes and onions just as it hits the top, and they're all covered by oil. And then we're going to season this heavily. It's going to help with the flavors. And this is then going to go onto the stove top, and it's going to poach. So cold oil onto stove top, bring to a simmer, and we're going to leave it there until the potatoes are nice and soft. All right, while your potatoes and onions are on the stove top, you're going to crack 4 large eggs and beat them. They don't have to be beaten completely until, all incorporated, just a rough beating, and that should be good enough. So once your potatoes and onions are nice and soft, you can kind of tell by pushing a spoon against them, and they'll kind of just split. Means they're ready. We're going to drain off all of the oil, so into a strainer, into a large bowl, collect all that oil. It's great. You can reuse it to make more tortillas in the future. It's full of potato flavors. They're great for eggs. Just hold on to it, don't throw it away. But we're going to strain this off, and we're going to try and remove as much of this oil as possible. And then from here, we're going to go into a second bowl, where we're going to mix the eggs and the potatoes together. So while those potatoes and onions are still hot, go ahead and add in your beaten eggs, and we're going to combine this till it's all one big happy family. And we're going to season it here too. So if you're not too scared, go ahead and try it. It's totally okay. If not, just kind of guess how much salt you think you need. If not, just go on the lighter side. You can always season after the fact. And then into a non-stick pan, a little bit of olive oil, and we're going to heat this up as if you're about to fry an egg. So get that nice and warm, and then we're going to throw in our egg and potato mixture into here. And we're going to just let it cook until it turns nice and brown on one side. Make sure you push it down so there's no air pockets. And as you see, it begins to kind of set almost like a custard. You can kind of check on the sides, lift them up. You don't want to go too far because you'll get really dry potatoes, but you can see here it's jiggly, but it's not sloshing everywhere. And at this point, you're going to use a large plate bigger than your pan, and we're going to cover it, and we're going to flip on 1, 2, 3. And there you go, nice and brown. And now here's the tricky part, is sliding it back in without making a mess. So go ahead and just take your time here. Put it right back in, and we're going to sear the other side. If you grab a spatula right now, it's great, and kind of just tuck in those edges back into the pan. And we're going to let this cook for another 1.5 minutes or so, and it's going to come right on off. If you go over, it's going to be very dry. I like mine to be a little runny. It's totally up to you. I know some people are kind of iffy about runny eggs, so however you want to do it at the end. Make sure you turn off the stove and don't burn your hands. All right, and for our next dish, because you can't just have one tapa, we're gonna make asparagus. So 1/2 of a large onion, thinly sliced, and it's gonna go with asparagus. So about 1 pound of asparagus. Make sure you clean them, so snap off the backs of them, and then kind of clean up the edges so you don't have those woody ends. And then from here, make sure your oven is on broil, or you can preheat to 400 degrees. These are going to get baked in there until they're nice and black and charred. And we're going to crack an egg on them when they're about 75% done. So go ahead and go get your oven ready, and then go grab a sheet tray. And onto this sheet tray, we're going to mix those asparagus, that onion, a little bit of olive oil, salt, pepper, and sherry vinegar. Just add a little bit of tang. Mix that all together so everything's combined. and then into the oven for about 10 minutes on broil. Keep an eye on it because sometimes it will go a little faster depending on how high or close it is to that broiling mechanism. And then if it's at 400 degrees, about 10 minutes as well. So once they've kind of blackened and they're about 75% done, we're going to go ahead and crack 2 large eggs right on top of them. And they're going to go right back into that oven until those eggs are cooked. You can go a little longer. I like to go a little less because I like a little bit of that yolk to be really, really runny. Totally up to you. And then we're just going to put that in there. It takes about 10 to 5 minutes depending on how hot your oven is and how large your eggs are. And then bring them on out and we're going to let that cool. And for our final tapa or pincho, whichever you want to call it, we're going to make some mushrooms, but first we need to make a vinaigrette for them. So 1 clove of garlic, very finely minced. This is going to go into the vinaigrette. So into a bowl goes the minced garlic, half of a lemon, a half cup of extra virgin olive oil, a 1/4 cup of sherry vinegar, another 1/4 cup of fino sherry, and then a couple good turns of black pepper, probably about half a tablespoon, and salt, as well as a little bit of dried parsley, about a tablespoon of dried parsley. And then we're going to whisk this till it's all combined. And then from here, we're going to put this to the side and we're going to start on the actual mushrooms. And nothing special here, just button mushrooms, and we're going to just make a very easy dish. So we're just going to snap off the stems, set these to the side to make great stocks for veggie stocks, or you have chicken, just kind of throw those in there. They add a lot of flavor. So go ahead and separate those. And once these are all separated, we're going to get a skillet nice and hot with some grapeseed oil, and we're going to put these button mushrooms upside down into the pan, kind of go in a circle and then fill in the center. We want this pan extremely hot because we're trying to look for a really heavy sear here. So go ahead and put these in, and we're going to let them sear before adding our vinaigrette. So once you start to realize that some of that water is being leached from those mushrooms, we can go ahead and add our sherry vinaigrette. We're just going to fill the center of those mushrooms, each one of them, with a little bit of that vinaigrette. And this is going to kind of steam them at the same time and add a little bit of caramelization and season them. So 3 purposes for adding that vinaigrette, and go ahead and do that. And we're going to let that then sear a little longer before flipping them. And once they get nice and gold and brown on the top, you can go ahead and flip them so they look like this. And then we're just going to kind of sprinkle a little bit of this vinegar around, kind of cook them, steam them, and this is going to caramelize and char a little bit, so it's going to be absolutely delicious. You're going to want to kind of flip these back and forth so you're not burning them. So you might have to do this a couple of times, flip them back onto their tops, flip them back onto their bottoms, add vinegar as needed. Do be careful because if not, these will get very sour if you add too much. But just kind of keep moving them around, get a nice char on them. And once all the sides are nice and charred and the mushrooms have become almost a little bit soft, we're not looking to completely remove all of the liquid from them. You can go ahead and take them off and we can start on the next part of this. So as good as these are by themselves, they're even better with a little bit of bread. So here's some homemade sourdough. If you haven't seen that recipe, go ahead and click on the icon on your right-hand screen. You can see how to make that. But we're just gonna kind of cut these into little squares and go ahead and toast them. And this is gonna be kind of our plate for our mushrooms. So we're gonna skewer these mushrooms right onto the toasted pieces of sourdough, and that's it. Couldn't be any simpler. So go ahead and do that with all of them. If you sneak 1 or 2 while you're doing this, even better. The cook deserves to eat more than everyone else. So now it's time to finish the other dishes. So for the asparagus and eggs, we're just gonna take them off of the sheet pan. Be careful not to burn your hands because the sheet pan will be ripping hot if it just came out of the broiler. And onto a plate, and we're just gonna finish that asparagus with a little bit of that sherry vinegar that we used for the mushrooms, and some pecorino or parmesan or some really nice aged manchego. Totally up to you. Just add a little bit of funk to it. Go heavy, have fun. Who doesn't like cheese? And that's it. 3 super easy tapas to impress all your friends. Tortilla de patata, classic Spanish, some mushrooms on sourdough with sherry vinegar, and then asparagus with egg, onions, and cheese. What could go wrong? Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you again. Hit that subscribe button and a like.